I am Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Susie.
And we're paranormal specialists who live in the most haunted city on earth, Savannah, Georgia. Every day is Halloween in our line of work, so join us as we spin true tales of haunts, murders, and disturbing Savannah history. I'm Madison.
I'm Chris.
And welcome to the most haunted city on earth. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Most Haunted City on Earth. My name is Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Susie.
And today we have very special guests with us. We had the two girls and the one ghost with us.
Yes, the one ghost is somewhere.
Yes.
Will make an appearance.
We also don't know if it's one ghost or many ghosts. I think the one is just the ethereal all ghosts.
Right.
But we're
The
all
royal
present
ghost.
here.
Yes.
Awesome. Yes, so Corinne and Sabrina have really been awesome throughout this. We've been collaborating and trying to figure out what to bring you guys to talk about spooky things because they do a really awesome setup where they do deep dives into different entities or hauntings, or in the case of today's episode, cryptids, and they kind of teach their listeners about those certain situations. But we are going to be taught today about some Superstition Mountain cryptids, right?
Yes.
Cool.
Well,
Yeah,
just
I'm
as some
excited.
context. Yeah. Buried treasure? Maybe?
We kind of
Maybe.
found a story that had multiple elements, and we're just
Yes.
like, how much can we throw at them at once?
Absolutely.
We're all in.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's
And
definitely.
as some context, Corinne and I love cryptids. Corinne specifically, if you listen to our podcast, Corinne, there's an ongoing joke that's a bit serious that Corinne is going to marry Bigfoot.
I love
think
that.
shirts that say
Awesome.
Bigfoot is my boyfriend.
Yeah.
I can't believe I didn't wear it today. But I should have. And one of the best gifts I've ever received, I'll have to send you guys a picture of it after. But Jordan Monsell, who's an artist who has a podcast of his own as well, but listens to ours, he painted on a piece of wood, like took a wood stump and painted a portrait of Bigfoot hugging me, and
Aww.
I'm naked. I'm
It's
like one with nature.
Like her little butt. Bigfoot's
I
like
little
lifting her
rosy
up.
cheeks.
I love
It's
that.
awesome. I freaking love it so much.
It's amazing.
But yeah, anyway,
want one
we
of
love
those.
cryptids,
We do.
and everything spooky, just like you guys. So
Yeah. We
Awesome.
pulled
I'm
our
excited to be here.
our listeners, and Mothman is the one cryptid people would want to go on a date with, or the most wanted.
Same. Yeah.
Yeah, this one here is
I
Are
love
you
Mothman.
a Mothman gal? Yeah.
I am a Mothman stan through and through for sure. But that's awesome. Yeah, I'm going to have to commission that artist to make me a
Mothman portrait.
Mothman version.
Yeah, you really should, because it's incredible.
That's awesome. Okay, cool. So, how do you want to start with this? Do you have a specific mountain cryptid you want to go with to start out?
Well, we wanted to just share the story of the Superstition Mountains, and then kind of towards the end, Corinne really gets deep into the cryptids of
Cool.
the
Which-
mountains.
I think you guys already know about this cryptid, so I'll be excited to hear your
Yeah.
thoughts on it. But
This is
Absolutely.
Arizona, right?
This is Arizona,
Okay.
Yes.
correct? Yes.
yes,
Which Arizona is very, paranormally inclined already.
Absolutely.
Vortexes and all of that.
Yes, certainly.
So yeah, the Superstition Mountains and the Lost Dutchman's Gold. This is the story we'll share with you today. This mountain range, the Superstitions, as people call them, is located in Arizona, east of Phoenix. And there are quite a few notable landmarks like the Weaver's Needle, which is an eroded spire of rock that formed because of an explosion of an ancient volcano, which I just think is so fascinating that there are volcanoes, just bubbling underneath our earth everywhere.
I know.
Just chilling.
Photography is so cool.
Yes. So next to the Grand Canyon Superstition Mountain Range is the most photographed and painted landmark in Arizona. And beyond the beauty, Corinne and I love beauty, whatever, great, beautiful landscapes, all of that. But there is something a bit more enticing to the two of us about Superstitions Mountains. Because what is better than photographing wilderness is the potential of hidden treasure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We're pirates at heart, I think.
Oh, yeah. We want some ill-gotten booty.
That's why we need to go visit you guys, because you have a lot of evidence of old pirating and whatnot in the South. So one day we'll make it down.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you have to go to Tampa, which is where I'm from originally. You got to go there for the pirate stuff. They are the pirate royalty of the South.
Yeah.
Well,
St.
and Charleston, of
Augustine.
course,
And Charleston, too.
famously hanged all the famous pirates.
For a while,
Yeah.
too.
One day we're going to get in a van and just travel to all the haunted places in the States. Then we'll take it overseas. It's just going to be a lifelong endeavor.
It'll be like a giant Scooby-Doo van, and we'll pick you up on the way.
Get in!
Hop on in.
We'll have to
There's Old
come up
Man
with
Tucker
a
the whole
custom-made horn for the car.
I love it.
So treasure. Yes, we're really excited about it. We'll get to more of the treasure details in a little bit, but there are some warnings to heed about Superstition Mountains because there have been countless disappearances and mysterious deaths within the mountain range. And if anyone watches The Office, I wouldn't say I'm superstitious, but we should be a little bit stitious about these mountains.
That joke was perfect for this episode.
I know. Good job, Sabrina. That's
Seriously.
I've been watching, I think I'm rewatching The Office for the 20th time currently.
Wow.
Yes. Okay. So there are people wide-eyed and thrilled, kind of like us, who hear hidden treasure and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to go in search of the hidden treasure. But many people who do fail to find the treasure. Actually, no one's found the treasure. And those who go in search of the treasure often do not find riches galore, but lots of gore, perhaps even their death.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so in our research, Sabrina and I were like, okay, well, legends are legends, right? Like, obviously we believe in a lot of them and a lot can happen in order to produce this legend. But in America, when there's cryptids or curses or things like this involved, we like to go back to the people who were here first, the native people, and see what sort of theories or superstitions they had around these locations. So we did that, and everyone should have listened to them. Spoiler alert, they didn't. but the native tribes, the Pima and the Apache people, they believed that there was something really, really powerful in the mountains. They were calling it this thunder god who would strike any trespassers to death. And every day and every night, these people, they would hear ominous sounds emanating from the mountains. So clearly they had reason to believe that there was something creepy going on in the Superstition Mountains.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Otherworldly. So they were really fearful, and they were really careful about keeping a safe distance from these mountains and from this godly being. But then, of course, as we know, in 1540, the Spanish conquistadors, they came to Arizona in search of gold. And the local tribes, they warned all the Spaniards. They were like, hey, here's what we think is going on in these mountains. You should not approach it. It's super dangerous. This mountain region is not to be fucked with. Like, I know you love gold and greed, but save yourself, man. And no one obeyed these warnings. No one heeded the warnings, right? Like, of course, everybody goes in exploring deep into the mountains, and shockingly, they disappeared and died. So it was the wrong choice for them, for sure.
No gold, glory, or God for them. So
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
They were
I
warned.
mean, I will say, I feel like there is no matter how much danger is associated with something, like, isn't there a little part of you that's still like, what if I do this? What if I go and find the
Oh,
treasure?
absolutely.
What if I
Yeah.
do one exception? Right? Yes.
some would call that intrusive thoughts, but some people.
Well,
I'm
we
ruled
like
by
to,
them.
yeah.
particular part of my life. Yes.
Corinne might be led by intrusive thoughts, so
It
yeah.
is.
They're not so intrusive if you invite them in.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Intrusive only to everyone else around me. Like, whoa. Some thoughts are better inside. But for these guys, all of these conquistadors and these gold seekers, these treasure hunters, they were like, whatever, like, who cares? That's just a bunch of hocus pocus. And so they ventured off into the mountains, and one by one, they were picked off. 2 men would be standing a couple feet away from one other person in the group, and when they turn their back just for a split second, that other person will disappear. And this was a regular occurrence. So this happened often, where groups would go together, and I feel like we hear these stories so much too when we talk about the wilderness and like missing 411 style situations where you're like, how does someone just disappear in a blink of an eye? And this kept happening. And some of these people were discovered. Some of them never found again. But the people who were discovered, they were found dead, mutilated, and all of them with their heads cut off. So that's a big theme here. Is there's a lot of decapitation in this story. And so people became really frightened of these mountains. And then that's when they nicknamed them the Superstition Mountains. And this was then known as this terrible and evil and frightening place that might have gold, but also will probably kill you.
Yeah, they were literally losing their heads for this gold.
Be rolling in this episode. Yes.
Yes. Wow. Interesting. You know, it kind of sounds like a session of D&D a little bit, but that's interesting. So
it is wild. There's so much that gets thrown at these people too.
Isn't there another mountain range somewhere in the world that is called like the Beheading Mountains?
Oh.
Or the Beheaded Hills, where people go in and they are decapitated. It is like a normal thing. I don't know if it's a Superstition Mountains, but I think there is another range somewhere that's worth looking up.
Right, because I remember hearing a story once about it was these like 18-inch dwarves or whatever that lived on a certain mountain, and I think that that creature was associated with beheading people on that mountain, and I cannot for the life of me remember where it is.
Yeah, I was like, it seems like it's possible that it's a TikTok trend right now. Is talking about the beheading mountains,
well, you
it's
You're
like
so
something
popular on TikTok. We love stalking your page.
Something relatively recently came up about that conversation that there's an area where people's heads are just popped right off. I would like to say that if you're dealing with like a Sasquatch like thing and it's just grabbing you out of the woods, grabbing you by the head
And the
Fucking you out.
force. Yeah.
makes a lot of sense, and wiggling you around.
Yeah.
Okay, before we all walk away at the end of the day, we need to figure out where this place is, because I think it's important to know where people are getting decapitated so that we
Right.
hang on.
not go there.
We have my handy dandy pocket computer.
yes.
It is one of those things that the more that we talk about the paranormal and just the things that go on in the world or bump in the night makes me want to stay home a lot more, because it's kind of like you don't know what you're going to get wherever you are. If there's mountain ranges where it's known for beheadings and disappearances.
Oh, it's West Virginia.
Oh,
West Virginia.
Decapitated mountains.
That sounds about right. West Virginia.
Hey, at least it's named appropriately, right? Because we
Right.
can't just accidentally go to
Right.
decapitated
Right.
You should know.
Oh,
Because
no.
Superstition's is like, throw some salt over my shoulder. It's like
how did I
Decapitation
get
Mountain.
here?
Your crystals can't save you here.
No. In the dwarves of West Virginia. These dwarves, I swear, dwarves are not to be trusted. They come across so cute and they're not.
Everything within that genre is just so, to steal a word that Sabrina uses more than me, it's so befuddling. Like, I'm just like, I don't know what to make of it, because there's so much trickery, and it's like,
Yeah.
there's so many things that also mimic other things in the supernatural world. So I'm always nervous that I accidentally did something wrong. Like, I met someone at a wedding who said that they were fae, and they didn't want to know my last name because I don't even remember like exactly the reason why, but like it would do something. And then of course we're sitting next to each other and we have like name cards, and I'm like, well, this
Now you know.
Well,
Corinne, you
I've
never told
invited
me
the
that.
fae.
because I'm scared to talk about it.
Yeah, never use a real name.
No.
I know, I
Pseudonyms
gotta start
only.
using fake names at my friends' weddings, right?
We actually had a listener share a story with us, and this is maybe one of the most bizarre stories we've ever, but also like in rapturing stories we've ever heard, of a guy who, I think it was on an eclipse, with a group of his friends, went to these hot springs, and while they were there, they heard another woman, and they were all entranced by her, and one guy ended up having sex with this woman. And in the morning, then like all of the guys were like, oh my gosh, she's so beautiful, almost like a siren. And then the next morning when they realized what had happened, they saw the woman and she was like, there's a photo of it and she's like morphed, almost demonic looking, and where like it's so strange. And the one girl who was with the group was like, yeah, you guys, like I was so freaked out why you were all obsessed with her. She was the only one who was not entranced by this woman.
Oh, it's like that one part of VHS where
right.
like the "I like you" girl like turns into the the bat thing. Yeah,
Siren.
yeah, exactly.
I love but hate that movie.
I know, right? That's wild. Yeah, I don't trust anybody who tells me that they're fae. I'm like, first off, big warning sign. But second off, are you really fae, or are you something else trying to pretend to be fae? Like
Even worse, yeah.
Do you know? Do you guys know? How are we supposed to tell her? What are we supposed to do if we're in that scenario? Because I had no clue.
You just take all precautions with the fae. I don't mess with the fae at all. I try to keep them very far away from me.
Yeah, unfortunately, once you're in it, you're in it.
Yeah.
You know?
But I mean, it is true. You don't want to give them your name because names are very powerful in like all facets of magic and folklore and things like that. And it gives them access to your life, essentially. When they know your name, it taps into your personal energy.
Oh, yeah.
And so
it's like
that's
and almost every
identity
culture
theft.
has a version.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I think that might even be a modern version of this frightful knowledge of your name leads to destruction or ruin. Because there's I remember thinking that when Death Note came out, because Death Note was a very modern anime manga, and it was if you know a person's name, their full name, if you can kill them,
right?
With a thought. And it's like
I have to watch that show because my brother has been recommending it to me.
It's so surprisingly good.
That's what he was saying.
Because it's wildly original, but it pulls from all these superstitions. You recognize that superstition of if you know someone's name,
right?
They basically are indebted to you. That's why demons hate when you learn their name.
Yeah.
But of course, saying their name gives them strength. So there's all kinds of gray area.
Yeah. Well, this also brings up like something Corinne and I talk about a lot is doppelgangers. Like if a fairy or a fae knows your name, is that where doppelgangers come from? Like, can they then impersonate you?
I mean, in theory, yes. A lot of it comes from they want something from you. They want to be able to have access to your life and the access to everything humans are able to.
Right. The scariest doppelganger thing I ever came across was that doppelgangers live inside mirrors. They're actually forming their shape by reflecting you.
Okay, so were you bothered by that? Were you bothered by that TikTok trend then when people were going? It was the audio. It was like she must have been out of her head.
Yes,
and it would be like in the mirror.
Yes. No.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's just it. The story is that sometimes when you look in the mirror, you just have that sensation that it doesn't look quite like you. There's something about the lighting or the mirror or something, and there's like, well, actually, it might not be you. It might be your doppelganger just waiting.
I do not like that.
And there were so it had a list of things like note how far away from the glass your reflection is. This is not something you really think about, but if you're looking at your reflection and it seems like the reflection is closer to the glass than you are to the mirror, you might be dealing with a doppelganger.
I'm going to cover all of my mirrors after this.
Oh yeah, no, I have horrible mirror phobia. I have so many scared things, and to the point. This book, it was called Mirror Lore, detailed that Bloody Mary is in fact a doppelganger story.
Oh.
That the Bloody Mary lore was that doppelgangers will sometimes get so close to the glass that they'll break through and they'll cut your throat with the shards of the glass, and then they'll put your body into the mirror realm and live out your life.
Oh, I just got chills.
This needs to be a movie. How does that not exist yet?
And as the story goes on, Mary was a woman who would never leave the mirror. She was always, looking in the mirror and staying in the mirror, and she never really paid attention to looking at herself. So it was a vanity, a warning, don't be Mary. Her doppelganger comes through the glass, cuts her throat puts her in the glass, but she wasn't dead when she went into the glass world, and there's no death on the other side. So she's just bleeding incessantly, floating through a black space. And so when you call to her, you're basically turning a light on in the dark, and she's coming to that mirror hoping that she can come through to finally end her suffering. And yeah, that was a chilling story. And I read that when I was like 12 years old, and I'm like, so
I've never heard that version of it.
It was very fascinating. And I spent the next 30 some odd years looking for that book.
I've yet to find it.
I've never seen it anywhere else. It was in a library in Italy, on a military base on Italy. I checked it out, and I've never seen it again. It was like one of those like Time Life books, those thin, like Time Life did a whole series of books on superstitions. I always thought it was one of those, but it apparently wasn't.
Maybe you glitched over into a new time.
It's full Mandela effect. It's like, do you remember this book? It's like, no, there's never a book like that. And I was like, the book cover was the woman in front of the mirror, but it makes a skull, like the whole picture. Have you seen that optical illusion?
You can remember it so perfectly. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it was a big oval picture of a woman sitting, looking at herself in the mirror. She had black hair, and if you hold it right, it looks like a skull. So it's like an optical illusion. Do you see a skull, or do you see a woman at the mirror?
I have an idea. You're going to have to work with an artist, or maybe you're an artist. You're going to work with an artist to recreate what this image looked like. And
it's a famous picture. I can get it.
It is? Oh.
Yeah.
Well, then I was going to say reverse image it so that you could try to find what text it's
from.
Find
the book, right, exactly.
Oh, that's a great idea. Or just let the internet try to find it, because I swear with the collective of the internet, they can find anything.
Start a Reddit forum.
Right.
Web sleuths.
Find mirror lore.
Yeah.
All crimes are going to be solved with the internet, I swear.
Oh.
Let me, hang on.
Leia.
But yes.
We've definitely got off topic here. I'm sorry. Yes. But this is the picture.
Oh.
See, she's sitting in the, and it's a woman sitting in a mirror.
Okay, yes, and it does look like a skull. Yeah.
It kind of gives the original illustrations of Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark vibes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so sorry, back to Superstition Mountains.
Yes. Superstition Mountains. Okay, so people were searching for the gold and no one was finding the gold, but in the 1840s, someone finally found the gold. And there are a few different variations of this story, but I'm just going to share one. And this is the one that is most often told. So in the 1840s, there was a German immigrant named Jacob Waltz, and he came to America similar to the Spanish conquistadors. There we go. He had heard of the gold and was like, I'm going to go searching for it. So according to legend, he found a massive gold mine hidden within the Superstition Mountains. But like winning the lottery today, he decided to keep it to himself. You know, you don't want people to know that you have a ton of money or where it came from. So he was like, you know what? I'm not going to tell anyone. I'm not going to get big mining companies involved. I'm just going to keep the location of this gold a complete secret, which maybe is a little bit of greed. He's like, this is my money. I'm not sharing it with anyone.
Absolutely, it's greed.
Yeah. Yes. Fair. And so he was the only person to know the location, and he refused to get anyone else involved. And he was also afraid that if the government found out, that they would then basically say, this is government land, we own this, you don't have any right to it. But this is where it gets even more mysterious. So people in town would say that Waltz would show up occasionally out of nowhere with nuggets of gold and would buy lots of drinks at the local pub, saloon. And when people would ask him about the gold, he would just get very weird and shifty and not answer any questions. And so rumors began to spread around the town that Waltz had found the gold, which of course meant people were like, okay, let's follow him into the mountains, stalk him through his little trek, and find the gold for ourselves. But Waltz was a bit smart. He knew how people were onto him, and so he familiarized himself really, really well with the terrain of the Superstition Mountains. And when he knew that people were following him, he would like zigzag through the mountains and basically lead these people into the middle of nowhere and lose them. And then these people would just like get stuck and lost in the mountains. Sadly, some of those people died because they just did not know how to get out and they didn't find the gold. There was one, Leia is running around like crazy.
She's like, I want the gold.
Yeah.
What if she knows where it is?
Yeah, she's like, listen.
Reincarnated.
She's Jacob Waltz.
She's like, oh, finally my moment.
Right. So there was one occasion where Waltz was, you know, heading out into the mountains, supposedly towards his gold. And there were two men who just would not give up. They were really adept in staying on Waltz's trail and he couldn't lose them. So Waltz just turned around and shot the both of them and killed them. And that's, I mean, so really greed is going on there.
Yeah.
The mystery remained even when Waltz apparently sold around $250,000 worth of gold to the U.S. Mint in the 1800s, which in today's money is like $5.5 million. So still, somehow no one knows where the location is. Waltz is just like waltzing around. I wonder if that's where the term comes from with his gold. and
He's
until
raking in money.
Truly. And then in 1891, Waltz was on his deathbed and, you know, he's tired, worn down. And he calls upon Julia Thomas, who is the owner of the boarding house that he was living in and apparently a woman he had forged a nice bond with. He really valued her and she had kind of taken care of him in his older age. And as he was fading into the light, slipping past into the next life or onto the ether, wherever it may be, that's on the other side, he whispered the location to Julia and slipped a piece of paper into her hand that was said to have a map, a hand-drawn map with the location of the gold. Ooh. Unfortunately, Julia hired two men to go in search of the gold and they followed this map. She heard the location from Jacob Waltz and they could never find it. Never.
Huh.
That's
Weird.
such a bummer. You think you're so close to a huge fortune.
Yeah.
You're like, X marks the spot. I finally have it.
The dwarves
like they had
took
the
it.
information.
The
right.
dwarves. The creatures
So-
of the mountain.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
true.
that's my biggest question is like, is there an entity within these mountains that kind of almost like strikes a deal with Jacob Waltz or with someone who does end up finding the gold and there's rules, you know, you can't tell anyone about it. Or what did Jacob Waltz have to give up in order to find the gold? I guess we'll
Right.
never know.
And gold is such a curiosity because it is revered around the world as this high value thing. But when you take into like ancient cultures, it's like, what was it that was so valuable about it? Was it that it was shiny?
Right.
You know, because like you asked today, it's like, well, it's an excellent electromagnetic conductor. It's like, yeah, well, ancient Egyptians didn't care about that, did they?
Right.
Or maybe they did. You know, maybe they knew
Right.
something we didn't know because the value of gold is so prevalent around the world. And it's like, it was a shiny rock, but there were lots of shiny rock.
Yes.
You know,
Right.
there was silver.
Yes.
There was, you know, platinum. There was,
Right.
you know,
It is
even
kinda
iron
funny.
still became
We
more
kinda
useful
just
than gold.
Make up our own constructs. Like, you know, what,
That's
what's
valuable.
to say, like, we can't be like, oh, this little dirt soil is like very valuable and like it's like kind of like Bitcoin and those things. Like there's
Yeah.
Famously,
no right.
the Dutch made tulips their currency. And then one
Yeah.
year a frost came through. Oh yeah, they were using tulips, and they're like tulips as currency. And then a huge frost came, and they went bankrupt. Like the entire country just like went belly up because of it. But
You know,
it's
the
interesting
Dutch are
because
also responsible. They dyed carrots orange, and then that is why all of our carrots are orange. I think they're naturally more white and purple.
white, like a
Yeah.
white root. Yeah, absolutely.
That makes so
Interesting.
much sense.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I didn't
There-
know that.
There is this
Sneaky Dutch.
psychological term, and I don't know it off the top of my head, but there is a human fascination with shiny objects.
Oh sure.
And I think they talk about this with Dahmer and like why he had a fascination with like severing bodies and possibly you know, post-mortem sex, is because of the glistening of blood. Like there is a psychological attachment and view of what is beautiful and shiny.
So the moral of this episode is that we're really all just crows.
Basically, ooh, shiny, ooh, shiny.
Yes.
Well, and more to the point is in most folklore, gold is the currency of the fae, or the
Right.
Rumpelstiltskin's a great example.
Yeah.
Able to do anything with gold, and the exchange being you give them something dear to you and you get gold in return. So maybe Waltz was going out and having commerce with some kind of supernatural being that just had a lot of gold, and was like,
Right.
there you go.
He had a
Or
cryptid
even I'm thinking
club.
about like
Right, bring us people to kill and we'll give you gold.
Yeah.
yeah, totally. Or just all of the times when people have like time slips into other dimensions, it's almost
Sure.
like me think like, what if there was this portal that just kind of either opened or didn't in this certain area, and Jacob was lucky enough to find it and just went every day, and maybe it was open, maybe it wasn't, but if it was, he got to enter into this
Stock
space
up.
with all of this gold.
Right.
It's
That's
like
very possible.
Gringotts, the
Yes.
Gringotts of the mountain.
I like that. I like that theory.
Yeah, that's-
Gringotts of the mountains.
Gringotts of the mountains.
Gringotts of the mountains. Okay, well, there are so many disappearances, so many beheadings, so many things that happened in Superstition Mountains before Jacob Waltz was even there. So he didn't start the lore at all in terms of beheadings. Like, this happened far before Jacob. He just happened to be this lucky one in the middle of the hunt for gold on Superstition Mountains. There were these two men, Sims Eli and Jim Bark, who spent 25 years searching for the gold here, but never found anything. And they were the ones that coined it the Lost Dutchman mine. And when Sabrina and I were talking about this, Sabrina, I'm gonna make you repeat the joke that you told me, because I thought it was funny.
Well, because this was after Jacob Waltz, I'm pretty sure. So these
Yes.
two men came in search of the gold afterwards, and Jacob Waltz was from Germany. So I was like, well, no, duh, they couldn't find the gold because they didn't even, like, they called it the Lost Dutchman, but Jacob Waltz was from Germany.
Yeah.
If they don't know their geography, how are
Horrible
they
at
going to
geography.
find it?
Terrible
Very
with maps.
corny, terrible joke, but yes.
No, but I mean, now
But it's
I
kinda
don't have
true.
any faith in Sims Eli and Jim Bark anymore, right? Like,
Right.
they're horrible at
They
geography.
couldn't
and
even
maps. Like,
identify Waltz as a
right.
German.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, you spent 20 plus years looking for gold and never found it. Come on. Okay, but these two guys, they searched forever and never found out where the gold was. But what was interesting about them is that they were an exception for people who entered the mountains often and came back alive. Like, they were never killed. So they got to come back and basically tell no tales, basically like, I didn't see anything, but at least I'm still alive.
So it's I guess a lesson of resilience.
Sure.
Perhaps,
They never
perhaps.
gave up.
Right,
Never gave
hey.
up. They didn't. But
Gold or
not-
death is what their motto was.
Gold or death, yeah. So apparently there's around 4 to 5 hikers that die annually in this area. And the Superstition Mountain Museum claims that it has more hikers disappear or die than any other mountain range in the world, which we know is not true. But,
And also, it's a weird thing for them to claim, like, proudly.
Yeah.
yeah.
Right.
I mean, like, maybe
Come
there's
to beautiful
another
Superstition
part of-
Mountains. You may die.
You may die. I feel like they're missing part of that sentence, though. It should be like, from nefarious creatures or something, because it's like, okay, well, like K2, Everest, like there's so many other mountains
Right.
Right.
that exist and claim lives. So it just a weird, bizarre claim.
Right.
It's a weird flex.
You're weird flex.
It's a weird
You could be
flex.
brutally murdered.
Yeah. Yeah. You want to be one of 4 or 5? You'll be dead, but
Those are better odds than Vegas.
you'll be famous. Yes. In 1896, 3 people died, and they were all found with their heads decapitated. And then in 1910, a woman went missing. Her body was found a few months later. And here's what's super interesting. When her body was found, on her body in a bag were a few gold nuggets inside. So she found the gold, but she didn't make it back out.
She didn't make it out. Interesting.
And then one of the most famous mysterious deaths that took place in Superstition Mountains was that of Adolf Ruth. He set out on a 2-week voyage in June of 1931 in search of the treasure. and unfortunately never came home. It wasn't until December of 1931, months after his disappearance, that searchers finally came up with a human skull. They found a human skull and it had 2 bullet holes. Officials determined that Ruth had been shot point blank and somehow his head had detached from his body and moved a third of a mile away from where he had died. So there's still like no one. How did
That's
his
an
head
impressive gun.
Yeah. How did it detach from his body? How did it get to where it was? And I know animals sometimes carry
Sure.
pieces of body.
I mean, is there any word on how these decapitations happened? Was it a tool? Was it an implement? Were they severed or were they ripped off? Anything?
I couldn't find anything specific about it, but I definitely don't think it was weapon based.
Sure.
Sure. Well, and it seems like you might be looking at like mountain lions, things
Yeah.
like that. It seems like cats when they kill, oftentimes grab by the neck.
The neck.
And you know, and the human neck does not withstand a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
We're really poorly made when you think about it.
Yeah.
We are pretty weak. It's just
Yeah.
our.
And I'm just picturing like newborn babies, their heads bobbing.
Yeah, we
Like,
can
that's-
even-
Right.
Yeah.
We're just like 1 inch away from being that. We're still very fleshy and vulnerable.
Well, have
But
you heard of
even
this
so-
theory that humans are actually from Mars? And one of the proofs is that babies can't walk. You know, of all the animals on Earth, all the mammals, when they are born, they're pretty able to walk.
Yeah,
but if we
immediately.
lived
Yeah. Within a few
in a
hours.
different gravitational way, the baby's body would, in fact, operate better in a different gravitational field. It would be able
I
to
love
move and utilize
this
its muscles.
theory.
Isn't that interesting?
Right.
I was like, wow, because the gestation period is so long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As opposed to every other, you know, animal on Earth, and so it's like, huh, and of course the amount of time it takes for a baby to become, you know, ambulatory doesn't quite match up with
Right.
other life on Earth. There's no other animal that takes that long
Yeah.
to function.
That is really interesting. I've never heard that.
Yeah.
Well, I think
it seems like it's a relatively new theory, but it's an interesting one.
The
I'm going to
the
start
girl
telling
babies-
people I'm from Mars.
Yeah.
There you
Yes.
Well, because
Yeah.
you can, because girls are from Mars to get more
Yes.
candy bars. But I think
Oh.
the boy babies are from Jupiter. Remember? Because they
Yeah.
get
Get
more
more
stupider.
Yes.
Remember that from elementary school?
Oh,
Wow,
the
that's a
Oh,
good
yeah.
biggest
pull.
burn there ever
It's
was.
such
Oh,
a
yeah.
burn.
God, I felt so good, so victorious when I'd be like, boys go to Jupiter to get more stupider. I'm like,
Yeah.
victory.
Yeah.
Victory in second grade. You're all beneath me.
It was a ceiling moment.
Right,
of-
exactly.
It was.
If it rhymes, it's true.
Yeah.
Until someone goes, whatever you say bounces off that whole like rubber thing, like it sticks back to you. I'm like, curse. The worst.
Okay. Well, to add to the mystery, so Adolf Ruth, his head was found first, and they were like, well, where's the rest of his body? And so they go in search of the rest of his body and happen to find a bottle that was floating along a creek. And in the bottle was a note, which read, and they believe this was from Adolf. It read, I am sitting under a tree in a creek with with a leg broke. I've got to have help quick. Finder of this note, please give to Howard Peterson. P.S. I have found the Lost Dutchman.
Ooh.
Searchers finally discover the rest of Ruth's body at a camp where his remains were left seemingly untouched. It was as if he was just like sitting, doing nothing, and then was suddenly shot, his head removed, and placed a distance away. And then there was also a note in his checkbook that said, Veni Vidi Vici, I came, I saw, I conquered. And the gun that he had on his person was not missing any bullets, which meant it wasn't his gun that killed him.
Mm-hmm.
And so his death and how he died, or who killed him and where the gold was hidden, still remained a mystery. And then there's another death in the 1940s. I mean, this is just a story of deaths after death
Yeah.
after death after death.
Death and
Which-
decapitation.
Yeah, which I hope we don't have to say it to anyone who's listening. Probably best not to go in search of the gold. And this is this episode should be heeded as a warning. So in 1940s, there's a man, James A. Cravey, who spent 10 days in Superstition Mountains, and it was a very, very public expedition. Like, people knew he was going. He flew in by helicopter. There was press about it, and he spent 10 days exploring before he urgently called his pilot to pick him up. But when the pilot arrived, Cravey was nowhere to be found. When he didn't show up, there was a search initiated, and as you probably could have guessed, his headless body was discovered, but his skull was not found until 6 months later. And just like Adolf Ruth's body, the skull was much further away from the rest of his body. And this is just another example of the numerous men and women who have died within Superstition Mountains, many of them found without their heads. To this day,
I want to know so badly what he saw, because if he called his pilot in a hurry and didn't say, like, I found the gold, come get me, or whatever, especially because it was such a public stunt, you think that he would have been a little more forthcoming if he had discovered the gold. But for him to be in such a rush and then go missing and be decapitated, it makes me think that he saw something and felt like he was in danger to kind of rush this public expedition that he was supposed to be on for longer.
Right.
Well, and a part of me wonders too if like Waltz wasn't like a chosen person by the
That's exactly what I was just thinking.
Creatures, like they had a bond or something.
Well, and the two men who left, who were able to go in and out, I wonder if they didn't have some kind of truce like knowledge.
Right.
Maybe they couldn't get the gold, but they were given egress to the to places. Because then it raises the question of the Dutchman itself. Like, where did the name Dutchman come from? If it was maybe something more like there is a Dutch, facet in these woods, wild men or something like that. Or of course, the first thing that came to my mind, of course, is the Dutchman, the famous ghost ship. Because by calling it that, you only see it every now and then and in different places. So the idea of calling the mine like a ghost mine, a mine that is never in one place at the same time, kind of sensation.
That's so fascinating.
I just got chills.
Which
maybe
in this
that's
sense,
why people don't know where it is. It just never appears in the same spot.
It never appears in the same spot, right?
Yeah.
It's and maybe they were onto that when they called it the Dutchman mine. It was like we're chasing a ghost.
Okay, well then this makes gold way more valuable, and I get why gold was the currency.
Right.
Okay, so speaking of this, so Jacob Waltz is pretty much the only person who had found the gold, and I do believe that it's very possible he had some arrangement or he was chosen, but there is one other person who is assumed and believed to have found the gold, and his name was James Kidd. And he was very, very rich, like sickeningly rich. And no one knew where he got this wealth. But he also spent a lot of time in the mountain range and would make quick trips similar to Jacob Waltz. And all of a sudden in 1949, James Kidd disappeared, gone. And people were like, did he die? What happened? Like there was no evidence of him picking up and leaving with his wealth because he left his fortune behind. And in his will, this is what makes me even more convinced that there is something much bigger and more supernatural happening. Because in his will, he said that his whole estate will go to anyone who could prove that ghosts existed.
Ooh.
Yeah, I was going to say, I know about James Kidd's will. I didn't realize that his wealth came from anything other than, but yeah.
Interesting.
Did anyone get his estate? Because I feel like the four of us here could prove the existence of ghosts and reap the benefits of this estate. Proof is a very difficult
thing. Because I've seen plenty of evidence and plenty of what we would assume is viable, even scientific proof in some cases. But the truth of the matter is, as a society, we're so stubborn against it that it has to be something so infallible, so universally recognized that proof is subjective.
Right.
I would still like my cut, but
I want to say, I heard of James Kidd from a TV show that was going to attempt to get the the inheritance or fulfill that thing. But of course they couldn't. So
I wonder where that money is sitting. Yeah.
Right.
The four of us need to do the reboot. And just
Yes,
right,
the
there you go.
reboot.
The hunt for James Kidd's estate.
well, because there's also some man, God, I want to say in Nebraska, who like buried his entire estate and created like a treasure hunt when he died. He was like,
Whoa.
good luck, and he dies, and now there are people just like digging all throughout Nebraska.
Oh my god.
I kind of want to do that, but like make it seem like I have a really big estate to leave behind, and then
Right.
you know, if someone finds
And there's
it,
nothing.
it's like it's my overall collection.
Literally.
My dad actually had a mini version of a treasure hunt happen to him when he was in his late teens. He was working for some man locally in New Hampshire and was helping him with like things on his property and just taking care of things. And my dad was like, this was the nicest guy in the world. Like, he was so caring, he was so generous, and he was just like someone my dad really looked up to. And many years later, this man, after my dad has like, you know, lived life, gone to college, has a family, whatever, this man had passed away, and his wife was left behind basically a treasure map of like, he buried a lot of their money because he was nervous about people coming. So he left her this sort of like not very clear treasure map of the property. And so she reached out to my dad, who'd spent so much time with this man and on their property, for help. And my dad was like, I think that this is where your barn sits. And so she had a few, I think maybe her own relatives, go into the barn and dig where my dad thought the X was. And they found all of his money buried.
Oh my gosh.
Oh.
That's fantastic.
Did your dad get a cut? I feel like
No. He didn't need any. The guy was so generous. I think he like gave my dad some money for like college or clothes. Like, he was just so kind to begin with. So
wow.
yeah, my dad
That's
was
amazing. Are you
happy
familiar
to help with the treasure.
Are you familiar with The Secret?
No.
So it was a book published in the
Yes.
80s where a man went all around the country and buried little ceramic jars all around the country. And the book is a bunch of poems that are supposed to tell you where these things are found. He was certain that every one of them would have been found a few years after publication. As of right now, only 4 of the 12 have been found.
No way.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, a real life national
and if
treasure
you go
for us.
online, you'll see how people have figured it all out. They figured many of the places out. Like one of them in Charleston, and me and my wife and her friend and my kid went running all through Charleston, like trying to dig into the ground because we thought we had figured it out too, based on these riddles. Great thing, fun to do. It's a treasure hunt. It's called The Secret. It's still out there, and there are lots of people working on it.
Oh my
Did
god.
you ever
and-
read
and-
Ready Player One? Because that kind of reminds me.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
Yeah, of that. Yeah. Wow.
The people from Adak Island, I'm sure, are probably going to be the ones to find it.
Right.
Have you watched that series on Netflix where it's like the people looking for gold on Adak, which is like a
No.
little tiny.
I've seen a few of the episodes, yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to season 2, and I won't spoil anything,
sure.
but you can
Okay.
imagine where that's going if there's going to be a season 2. But yeah, I feel like you guys would enjoy that if you like treasure hunting, because it's literally like this tiny, tiny island off of Alaska. It's like the southernmost point of Alaska, I want to say. And it was a military base. And so there was a pirate who had buried his gold all over this island. But when the military came in, they buried a bunch of missiles and things like that, explosive devices in the ground, and they're still there. So it's really hard to pinpoint where the gold is without hitting a missile.
It's like a real life game of Minesweeper.
literally,
Yeah.
it is the most wild
Risking
thing.
your life for this treasure.
I think I watched 2 episodes of that first season, and it really is, for how much they don't find necessarily in the first season, it is very like you're on the edge of your seat the whole time because of exactly what you said, where like is it gold or are you about to blow up
Right.
on television?
Yes.
basically.
Well,
It
I
is
mean,
really
they
scary.
they have the mayor of the town of like 12 people. So they have him there, and he is very safe. So, you know, that kills the vibe a little bit because they're like, oh, like just let him dig. It probably isn't a missile.
It probably isn't a missile. There's a good chance it's not a missile.
If you have a town of 12 people and 3 people die, that doesn't look good for you.
Right?
It's a quarter of your population.
Well, a lot of these people they're like supposedly like treasure hunting experts, allegedly, the people they bring in. Because it was like one woman who's a scientist, and then there's these 2 guys that are like super crafty with metal, and they can make shift devices out of scraps essentially. And then you've got the mayor who's like who's just there to be annoying essentially. So wow. I want to see them find this treasure though so badly.
Invested, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm invested, and I haven't even seen it yet. Okay.
When does season 2 come out? Do you know?
I have no idea. I'm sure it'll come out soon. They had to like end because the frost came in because the ground freezes, and so you're not able to dig for like a long period of time. So I'm hoping that it will be coming up soon. But yeah.
Wow. Okay, we're definitely gonna watch that. I also just realized as we were talking that I'm drinking from one of our 2 Girls, 1 Ghost mugs, but this right here says "Ill-Gotten Booty Popper," and it's a little seductive pirate with his big old booty just posing on the treasure.
With his treasure.
Yar.
So
love it.
It's fitting for today.
Yes.
It's perfect.
Okay, we're about to get to the cryptid, or the cryptids of Superstition Mountains. But there is a couple of beliefs before we get to that. So the local tribes in the area, some have said that there is a hole within Superstition Mountains that leads down into hell, and that great dust storms that cover the valley are caused by the wind that blows from the mouth of hell. So they, you know, like we started out telling this story, like they have a great fear of this land, which then, you know, means they respect it and are very cautious and careful and are like, okay, there's something bigger than us here. We're going to respect this land. And clearly it doesn't want us trespassing, so we're not going to. But of course, many of us do. The other theory that I'm not really sure about, but Jacob Waltz, because he didn't die until 1891 and death started happening before that time. But part of me is wondering if his spirit is lingering there and still continuously leading people astray. Maybe he did make a deal with whatever this greater being is to basically sacrifice people. So, you know, I don't know. I don't think we'll ever really know.
Sure.
But, you know, it's fun to theorize.
Right.
Stories of like holes to hell, caves to hell, you know, those also are an international phenomenon, that there are these caves that go to another plane, another place, and that kind of goes into that portal scenario, that the cave may not be like the physical cave as we know it, but a metaphysical cave that goes to another dimension. And it's very possible that you have to have very specific physiology, a very specific, you know, energy pattern, you know, like Waltz may have been just that kind of person that can, you know, activate and or find this portal that they
kind of like Goatman's Bridge.
Kind of like Goatman's Bridge, yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
If you guys aren't familiar with Goatman's Bridge, basically it's like it's a bridge that allegedly you're able to go at a certain time and knock on the bridge and the Goatman appears, but people have also found that there is a portal of some sort that they believe leads to hell, more than likely just leading into some level of the plane of some sort. But people have been possessed there. They've had people die at Goatman's Bridge. But that leads me to think a really kind of out there theory of what if you don't fit the pattern to enter the portal, it just rips your head off.
Yeah, your head falls
Yeah.
Your head. Yeah. It's like almost like what is
Squid
it
Games.
from Aladdin? Like the big like tiger's tomb thing.
Right.
If you're not meant to go in there, it spits you out into the sand or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, that
That's
would be
fascinating.
Maybe Waltz was just short, and everyone else was walking, and they hit the top, and it just pops their head off.
Yeah.
And it's invisible. You can't see it. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't see
We
it.
need
So
more evidence. Yeah, we need like height, stature, posture.
everybody.
I need all of that of everybody. How high they wore their hair that day.
Right, exactly.
Were they wearing a hat? Like, oh, we have questions.
We
That's a
have
good
many
point.
questions.
Okay, but here's the theory that I think we've all been waiting for. That involves a
Dun, dun, dun,
cryptid.
dun.
Dun, dun, dun. And Chris, I heard you say it earlier, but in Arizona, there is a creature called the Magean monster. And its physical description is extremely close to Bigfoot. It's basically like the Arizona Bigfoot is what it's called or referred to. It's this massive bipedal beast that stands 7 to 10 feet tall. It has inhuman strength. It has red beady eyes, just like Bigfoot. People have said, who have seen it and survived, they say that it has this long, matted black or red brown hair covering its whole body. I've also seen a few people say that the one that they saw had white hair, and that around its face, it's not quite as hairy. So it's not like really Chewbacca-esque. Like it's a little bit more ape-like around the face. And then the hair begins kind of at the side of the face, covering the whole body with some missing parts around its chest. Its fingers are super long, talon-like basically, super sharp with like 2-inch long talons at the end of its nails. And one of the common traits of Bigfoot is that Bigfoot doesn't smell too great. And that is true of the Magean monster too. So people who've gone near it have said it reeks, like it is rancid. They said it smells like, if you can imagine urine and feces and dead fish mixed together, that is what it smells like. So it's super
And
gross.
Why would I?
And Corinne, you are attracted to this?
Or super sexy, depending on whatever you're into.
You know,
It's called musk.
Yeah.
It's musk.
It's nature.
I mean, it makes sense that it would smell just awful because I don't imagine something considered a monster would take much time for their personal hygiene.
No.
You know, they're probably like, I'm a monster anyways. You know, it's
Yeah, whatever. And too, like another thing with this monster / probably Arizona Bigfoot is that people say that the woods go quiet when it's near. So like right before they have an encounter, it's completely quiet and they don't hear anything, and then it suddenly like announces itself really violently and really viciously. So we know that it's in Superstition Mountains because in the 1920s there were 2 men who entered who entered into Superstition Mountains in search of gold, and these 2 guys brought a 450-pound donkey with them. So the donkey was carrying their supplies in and hopefully carrying some gold out.
Are donkeys that heavy?
yeah, that's a chunky
450
donkey.
pounds. Whoa.
You
Okay.
want the strongest and biggest donkey you can find.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I don't know. They're big boys.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But in the
that's
middle-
only like 150 pounds more than me. So
I know.
I could go with
Given how much I weigh, I'm like, oh, well, I don't think I'm that big.
go donkey.
Yeah, it's half of me. So, or I get not half of me.
Oh, Corinne.
What?
You look great for 850 pounds.
Oh my god, I know.
That's
Catch me
amazing.
on TLC,
What kind of camera are you using?
I'm surprisingly heavy. I've always said it's like my greatest asset because if someone were to kidnap me and try to pick me up, I'd buy myself a couple seconds by the amount of shock that they'd probably experience lifting what they think is a lot lighter than it actually is. Because I've seen it on many people's faces before when they try to lift me, and I'm like, ooh, that's an asset. I'm going to use that.
Yes.
Hopefully not in the future, but if I have to, it's there for me. So I don't think I would win against the Magean monster, though, because this thing is massive. And in the middle of the night with these 2 guys and the donkey, it suddenly appeared. A 9-foot creature appeared, this Bigfoot ape, and plucked the donkey, like under its arm, basically, and just swiftly took off with it. So there was no struggle, nothing. It was like the easiest thing ever for this creature to lift this 450-pound donkey and just run away with it.
Oh,
Well, that's going to pop a person's head off.
right,
If
That's
he's
yeah.
that strong, just grab it and pop.
right.
Yes. And then in 1903, there was a man named I.W. Stevens who came across a beast that matched the same description in the Superstition Mountains. And he said that he was watching the creature. He like happened upon it, and the creature was standing over 2 cougars. So you were just talking about like mountain lions and
Right.
and their ability to kind of like snap people's necks and take a head with them. But this creature was killing these mountain lions, killing the cougars, and
That's
drinking
impressive.
its blood. At least that's what this guy thought
Ooh.
he was witnessing. And then the creature, what did you say?
Chupacabra-esque.
Yeah.
Very chupacabra-esque, yes. I mean, all the same geographical area as
Sure,
chupacabras,
the region.
too.
Yeah.
So, very possible that there's just like bloodthirsty monsters throughout the southern United States.
It's like Mama Chupacabra.
Well, you know, when you think of desert too, just the idea of very thirsty things, you know,
Yeah.
resorting to just drinking blood as a source of sustenance and to cure that thirst. You know,
Yeah.
if you're not near a lot of water sources, you know, you could see that being a resource.
Nothing quenches your thirst like some fresh blood.
Oh, yeah.
Popping the head off of a miner.
Yeah.
And just
I mean, maybe similar to the Dahmer thing and crows.
Right.
Maybe the blood is the shininess
Oh,
also
sure.
gets
Shiny.
you. Golden blood for this.
Now
Golden
I want to
blood.
know what that term is. I'm going to look it up.
Yeah, look it up.
Let's see.
Look it up. Okay, but this guy who approaches or accidentally approaches this monster in the woods, he's watching this creature drink the blood of cougars, and then the creature notices him, and he's like, obviously shitting himself. And the creature apparently like picks up a stick or something of some sorts and starts waving it at him really aggressively and lets out what he described as this unearthly screech. Just like a horrifying scream. And other people who've also thought that they heard this monster said that it sounds a lot like a woman like screaming, like blood-curdling scream. Okay, here's why I think that this monster is responsible for all of the people whose heads roll down the mountain. It's because not only has this monster been seen multiple times, I'm just going to start calling him Bigfoot. Not only has the Arizona Bigfoot been seen multiple times, it is said to be extremely territorial and extremely aggressive, and it is known to decapitate deer and other wildlife before eating them. That right there is the MO, right?
Sounds like our culprit.
The only thing
Sure.
that's missing is like it didn't eat the bodies of people, but maybe it doesn't like the taste.
the taste might be a little
Yeah.
off. Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, they might think it's a little yucky.
When you think of something that is that powerful and that strong, finding the quickest and easiest way to kill an animal, but you know, removing the head is the quickest and easiest way to kill an
Yeah.
animal. So,
Right.
you know, that
That's
kind of makes
true.
sense. If you're that strong, you know, it's like, I'm not going to fight. I'm not going
Right.
to waste my time.
Well,
I'm just going
clearly-
to rip the head off.
It's very nonchalant.
It's very nonchalant, yeah.
You know,
Right.
just in its actions of being like, oh, this donkey is mine now. Peace out. You know, things
Yeah.
like that.
It's
But-
also interesting that it picked up a stick
Yeah.
to, you know, get off my lawn, you know, that
Right,
kind of
isn't it? Like a little
notion
threatening
that it would
Yeah.
grab a stick.
baton.
But it's possible too that it doesn't recognize, if it sees a human in that form, it's thinking it's a type of the same creature.
Right.
And so it's like, I've got to bully up. I've got to, you know,
Right.
shake a stick at it, you know.
Yeah. And too, now that we're talking about it, it's making me think like, what if, I know some of the other animals like deer are said to have been eaten, but like the cougars were seen getting the blood drink from them. So I'm wondering if what if this creature really is after just blood and pops the head off, throws it, and it's so strong that it does end up
Hundreds
far
of-
away.
yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
100, 200 yards away because it's like the strongest creature on earth, and then just drinks the blood. And so when
Yeah.
people find someone's body days later and there's not much blood there,
It would be hard to
anymore,
tell that it was exsanguinated. Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, so maybe that's it.
Well, the point being is don't go wandering into these mountains because because clearly people are like excited when they're like, "Oh, we got another one." You know, the
Well, plus one decapitation is bad enough. A
Yeah.
series of decapitations should be a clear indicator that this is not a place you want to visit. You know?
right.
Once
I
it's
feel
like,
like
oh, that
there
place
should be
is
a
known for
caution.
decapitation.
Like a caution
Right.
sign. Like enter at your own
Beware
risk.
of rolling heads.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And too, it's like this stuff has been happening for centuries. And
Centuries.
Arizona Bigfoot, the Migan monster, has been seen. Like I think the last sighting that I saw online was like 2010 or something. Like people are still
Wow.
experiencing this creature. Oh, well, this is also.
Which also means people are still going out there.
Right.
Stop it.
Yes.
People are. I think there's like regular hiking trails,
Yeah,
there, which is
yeah.
the problem.
Well, maybe if you stay along the trails, it's okay. It's if
The
you venture
designated path.
off. Yeah.
Okay, but have you guys heard about the theory that I'm sure you have, the Bigfoot is an interdimensional being?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Could this
Yeah.
also have to do with a portal of sorts,
Yeah.
maybe?
Of course.
Oh yeah. I mean,
If there's and because there's a story from the indigenous peoples of this cave to hell, which I've always thought when they tell stories like that, it's probably not a physical cave. It's probably a
Right.
metaphysical cave. It's a
Yeah.
and so that concept being, things that live on the other side can just come and go.
Yeah.
And and their existence is probably, we live in a hot, arid, weird place, and then a hole opens up and it's flush with vegetation and life, and
Right.
So it would seem very welcoming to go into the woods if
Right.
the alternative is a place covered in gold rocks and little else.
well, and I mean, too, it would also make sense with the smell if they're coming out of that, portal to hell, if you will, because you see that a lot with demon lore.
That's
is
right.
that they smell
Sulfurous,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. They smell like sulfur because that's supposedly what hell smells like, and it just the trace of it comes with them.
Right.
So. That would be interesting if they're basically guarding this portal, like they're essentially a guardian spirit of some sorts. And if you happen upon it on accident, it's like, boop, and it's like, great, some nourishment along the way,
Right.
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
Which also kind of
What if
accounts for a
also-
lot of.
Go ahead.
I was going to say that also aligns with a lot of demon accounts, a lot of accounts of these demonic forces that show up. They could be what we encounter as Bigfoot, because their level of involvement in our plane might be limited dependent on what portal they use.
Yeah. It also makes me wonder now if their smell is not necessarily based on where they're coming from, but this traveling between portals, like, I don't know, I'm imagining like a quick shock of electricity. Like if that
Right.
travel causes a certain smell.
I mean, there are so many theories you could throw into that.
Absolutely.
Because it's like, because until you enter a portal yourself, like you really aren't ever going to fully know exactly. A lot of theories are just spitballing. So
Sure.
Yeah.
Because the idea of like traveling to another plane, like through meditation versus physically going. Physically, you might be walking through a field of just foul smelling stuff.
Yes.
Just to get to the other side, you're just piercing a membrane, and that membrane is like gooey and smelly.
Yeah, I mean, astral projections, we could have a whole other episode about that. But
Oh my
I know.
gosh.
Absolutely.
It's so
It is so-
fascinating.
It is fascinating, but also horrifying in so many facets. But
I did it once by accident. It was scary.
oh boy.
Yeah, by accident, it's horrifying.
I was like snapped awake by a voice whispering in my ear, and I could feel it in my physical body that said, "Wake up." And I felt myself like completely return to my body, and I sprung awake, like sat back up, kind of like you see in horror movies. Like I truly was snapped back into my body.
Wow.
Oof.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll have to discuss that further, maybe in like a Parajunkie exclusive episode. But
Yeah.
But all right. Well, thank you guys so much for bringing all of this really fascinating research. Like, I really haven't done much like info digging into the Superstitions Mountains and
I
stuff
only
like
know
that. So it's,
very cursory things, because I think there are lizard people in
Oh,
Superstition
sure.
Mountains, and
I mean, it's
Oh,
Arizona.
UFO sightings.
Oh,
yeah, I was gonna say.
UFOs, reptilian beings, abductions in caves. There's so much more. But we would be 4 hours in if we told you guys everything.
Yeah.
right,
Right.
exactly.
We'll
You'll
just
have to
have
do
you
a
back
part 2
sometime.
yourselves.
Yes. But yeah, thank you guys so much for joining us today. This has been so fascinating, and I am definitely going to do some more diving into this because I am very curious about this portal to hell and Bigfoot Claw Daddy over here.
Claw Daddy. Yes.
That should be a shirt. Bigfoot Claw
Right?
Daddy. You gotta get some
JT
merch.
add it to the merch list. Claw Daddy. But
Well, thank you for having us. This was
Yeah,
so
this
much
was
fun.
so much fun.
yes, and if you guys don't listen to their podcast, you definitely should be. obviously this aligns very well with the stuff that we already talk about. So it's just even more paranormal, spooky things to listen to. So you can find them under Two Girls, One Ghost. And do you guys have anything you want to plug before we get wrapped up?
No, just come listen to us.
Come listen.
Yes. If you hear an EVP, let us know, because a lot of people do. And we're trying to sort of like catalog all the places that we've had paranormal activity creep into our podcast.
Well, also, your podcast is the most haunted city on earth podcast. And we call our podcast the most haunted podcast in America because our listeners have had countless experiences while listening to our podcast.
Oh boy.
That's amazing.
Some people take breaks, but just, come in open-minded. Try not to haunt you.
Yeah, a lot of our listeners as well, they can definitely say that they've had a lot of paranormal experiences, and some people lean into it and like to listen to more about their paranormal experiences. But yes, so thank you guys for listening today. If you don't already follow us on social media, you can follow us under Haunted City Podcasts on all platforms. And if you want to become a para junkie, you can follow us over on Patreon, get all sorts of exclusive content. JT and I are actually going to Lake Lanier next week, which is the super haunted lake, which so that'll be fun. Let you know if I feel like I'm getting dragged down by anything.
I hope not.
I'll keep you updated. I know, right? I'll keep you updated. But with that though, thank you guys again. My name is Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Susi.
And stay spooky, y'all.